This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at the Home of Medicine Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Open up the Home of Medicine's events page found over at homeofmedicine.org/events with Home of Medicine spelled OMOFmedicine.org for details on all the very cool events and happenings taking place in Ohm's comfortable public lounge. Tomorrow on Saturday, October 6th, the Ohm will be home to their free monthly comedy show, which starts up at 9 p.m. If you like to laugh, then you should find your way over to the Home of Medicine, now found at their new ground floor location at 111 South Main Street in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for their monthly comedy show. Once again, you can find details for that show and all their other cool events over at homeofmedicine.org/events. Thanks to Ohm's owners, Mark and Keith, and the rest of the crew over at the Home of Medicine for supporting today's news. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Friday, October 5th, 2018, and you're tuned in to episode 585 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Washington State grabs this week's final top story as Washington cannabis regulators announced a major change in regulations on Wednesday, banning the manufacturing of marijuana-infused gummies and hard candies, effective immediately. New rules will go into effect at the turn of the year that ban the sale of any kind of candy that could appeal to children. And in a meeting on Wednesday of the Washington Liquor and Cannabis Board, regulators announced that cannabis companies need to stop manufacturing those cannabis-infused edibles. Washington cannabis companies will be given until April to sell out any remaining inventory they have of those products, but after that, the candy and gummies vertical will no longer exist in Washington State's legal marijuana market. As you might imagine, there are plenty of people in Washington's industry who aren't happy about that. Pop over to Marijuana Business Daily for the full read. As expected, Massachusetts has given the official nod to its first 2 adult-use marijuana dispensaries. We picked up on this news earlier this week, and yesterday the state's Cannabis Control Commission voted in favor of giving license to Cultivate Holdings in Leicester and New England Treatment Access in Northampton. Those 2 shops still need to go through one last final inspection by the state, but if all goes well, Massachusetts could see legal adult use go on sale for the first time within the next few weeks. One interesting twist on this one is the fact that Cannabis Control Commission member Shalene Title, who in full disclosure is a friend of the show and one of our on-hiatus regulars on our weekly title Marijuana Today, abstained from votes on licensing to protest the community host agreements the companies were forced to sign to get buy-in from their local towns, which is required by law. Those community host agreements are supposed to be limited in the amount of revenue towns can demand from legal shops, as well as their overall length, but that hasn't stopped most places from demanding and getting terms that go far and beyond those statutory limits. This is a good story to read in full. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com and on our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily. Our final top story of the week is a piece over on New Cannabis Ventures about a giant, just announced round of funding by Canadian licensed producer Tilray, which says it intends to raise $450 million US in a private placement to qualified institutional investors. Tilray says it expects to close on the deal on October 10th and will use the money to fund current operations for future expansions and to pay off a mortgage on one of its large cultivation facilities. Swing over to New Cannabis Ventures for all the numbers and details on this one. This infusion of cash will put Tilray in a decent position to compete against Cannabis Growth, which is sitting on the billions of dollars in cash it got earlier this year from Constellation Brands. Canada is getting interesting. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, the Home of Medicine Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center of Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are a lot of reasons why so many medical marijuana patients choose to get their medical cannabis from the Home of Medicine, some of whom drive by a fair number of other dispensaries on their way to Home. Home's patients value the fact that there's no sales pressure at all put on them in the buying experience at Home, and that their educated and well-trained staff are there first and foremost to make sure that they get exactly what they need, medical marijuana that will make them feel best. If you're lucky enough to live in or around the Ann Arbor area, then you need to visit Ohm to see how medical cannabis should be done. There's just something right about how the Ohm of Medicine does business. You'll feel it as soon as you walk in their doors. Learn more about the Ohm of Medicine, including how you can find their new ground floor location at 111 South Main Street over at ohmofmedicine.org, which is spelled omofmedicine.org. All right, time for the Blitz. Ohio's Board of Pharmacy recently issued a decision that finds that CBD products can only be sold by licensed medical marijuana dispensaries. That could turn out to cause some troubles for the state's patients, as right now CBD can be found in a number of non-dispensary stores and is sold to people who might not necessarily have or want a patient card. The Board of Pharmacy has said that anyone found with CBD who is not a registered patient could face criminal charges, though as Fresh Toast's Mike Adams points out, it's not exactly clear how strongly that would actually be enforced. Yesterday, a deal was announced in Utah that we reported on earlier this week, with two sides of the medical marijuana issue agreeing to support a plan that will have the Utah State Legislature come together in special session to pass medical cannabis law following the November vote on medical marijuana ballot measure Proposition 2, which enjoys support levels north of 60%. Yesterday, Utah Governor Gary Herbert held a press conference and released details for the compromise plan, which eliminates home grow and cuts down both on the number of licensed dispensaries and qualifying conditions. Zip over to Chris Roberts' Story on Marijuana Moment for more on this one. Marijuana entrepreneur and former professional cyclist Floyd Landis is launching a new professional cycling team that will be sponsored and named for his namesake Colorado cannabis dispensary, Floyd's of Leadville. The Washington Post is reporting that Mr. Landis is funding the team using money he received in a settlement from former teammate Lance Armstrong, who was taken down as a rider after Landis blew the whistle on his doping activities after Landis himself was booted from the sport for cheating. His new team will compete in the Continental Circuit, the third tier down in the realm of U.S. professional racing. The prohibitionist group Smarter Approaches to Marijuana, which claims to not be funded by big industries in danger of losing money to legal marijuana, even though it refuses to reveal its funders, is raising and spending millions of dollars to convince Americans that marijuana is really, really bad. Really. Smarter Approaches to Marijuana, also known as Project SAM, is a paycheck machine for founder Kevin Sabet, who talked donors into burning $4.5 million in donations in 2016 alone. Right now, Project SAM is throwing money away in Michigan in a bid to head off that state's embrace of legal adult use via ballot measure next month. Another good one to read in full. Speaking of ineffective opponents and of Michigan, Victoria Kim over at Marijuana Moment is reporting that a planned demonstration by marijuana prohibitionists against gay speech at the University of Michigan by travel writer and marijuana legalization supporter Rick Steves completely fizzled out as a massive group of 0 demonstrators showed up to protest. There's some chance that Marijuana Moment's head brain, Tom Angel, had something to do with that, as he caught wind of the planned protest early and shared the news widely. So the prohibitionists at the regressive group Healthy and Productive Michigan, which arranged the failed action, might have just chickened out. Either that or they were weak in numbers to start. Either way, they didn't look good in this one. And finally, for today and for the week, we have another wonky marijuana media story with Washington State-based The Fresh Toast announcing plans to raise $2.5 million in a Series A round. The Fresh Toast is a consumer-focused cannabis site that claims just under 2 million monthly visitors. Those are the headlines and news for the day and for the week. I'll be back with you again Monday morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, the Ohm of Medicine, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in, starting your day with marijuana today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.